Okay. All right. I think let's start now, isn't it? I just want to welcome everyone to this edition of OFNC Back to the Youth event. Today we're starting strong. We'll be looking at starting strong in the UK as a student. And we have our guest speaker, Dr. Esther Ihekweazu. I got it. All right. So before we start the talk, we just want to say we'll start with a word of prayer. Then if you've got any questions, please post them in the comment section and it will be picked up and responded to. We just want this to be as interactive as much as possible. We won't wait till the end before we address the questions. So just feel free. We're going to have also a feedback form at the end of the talk. Please, we would like to get your feedback on what we should look at, what other topics you want us to cover, and ways to improve our event. So without going into any much discussion, because we have a lot to cover today, we'll start with a word of prayer and we'll begin. Let us all pray. In Jesus' name.
Amen.
Our Father and our God, we thank you for today. We thank you for this event that is taking place today. Lord God, we commit the time, our speakers, to your hands, oh God, and we ask, Holy Spirit, have your way.
Amen.
Guide the conversation, even the questions, and I know that each and every one of us will be blessed in the name of Jesus. Father,
Amen.
the words, the testimonies to encourage one that you are the God who comes through for his children, that you are interested in our affairs. And Lord, we would give you all the praise and glory for all that you do today. For in Jesus' name we prayed and given thanks.
Amen.
Amen.
Amen. So before we begin the talk, Dr. Wenger would take us through and tell us what OFNC is about and also tell us about the Back to the Roots program. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. And it's a joy to have all of us on the call. It's good to also see a speaker, join us today. So talking about the OFNC is the short acronym for the Overseas Fellowship of Nigerian Christians. And these days we had Friends. The OFNC started in the 1960s as one of the promptings of the young Nigerians who came to the UK to study, and at the time found it necessary to gather to fellowship. And so what they started at the time, over the decades now has now metamorphosed into about 23 branches in major cities of the UK right now. Basically, we seek to advance the Christian faith in very many ways. We seek to alleviate the situation of people going through situations. We seem to be there for people, giving guidance and support. We have very many groups within the OFNC: the men, the women, the children, and one of the key groups is the Back to the Roots group. The Back to the Root group, sort of provides an opportunity for the OFNC to give back. Having started as a student organization or student, led or oriented organization, it's then have ways of giving back. And that's why we call it Back to the Root, because that's the root, being a student organization. I believe that in very many ways we've always set out to support people, help people, people like Dr. Ife, and virtually all of us who are on the team have always been a support system to many. I came in many years ago, 2008, and had the same support. people helping us to stabilize, to get settled into the UK system, and then to get going, as it were, with academic, with different phases of life, and so it's been useful. And as such, we are also part of this team, hoping to do the same for the present and coming generation. I believe that today's what we'll be looking at today in terms of starting strong in the UK will be very useful. No matter what we think we have known about the UK, it will still offer quite a lot of top-ups as to really living well in the UK. I'll pass on to Dr. Esther Ihekweazu, who will take us from here.
Hey, good evening, everyone, and thank you very much, Dr. Dimu. Thank you very much, Dr. Uchechi Nwadike, as well, for speaking earlier on. Just to let everyone know that this program is being recorded, will soon be on YouTube. So you were all told as you joined, I'm sure, the program is being recorded. But in a day or two, I'll also send the YouTube link around for everyone who might be interested. If you know of anyone who would enjoy the program, please make sure that they are that you pass the link across to them, because we believe, as Dr. Dimu has said earlier on, that everyone would really be blessed, especially if the issues that we talk about today apply to you, as in maybe you're a student, a young graduate, So please feel free to send the link around, and also feel free to send in your questions so that this becomes an interactive session. If you want to raise your hand, feel free to raise your hand and we'll call you up to ask your question. If not, we'll ask the question for you. But I want to thank our speaker and introduce you, Dr. All right.
Esther Ihekweazu.
Wait now. I promised I was going to say it now. I practiced this thing for 3 days. I don't like to. You won't even allow me to settle
Okay,
down.
give it a go.
Exactly. If I get it right, please, all of you, I want to hear you clap. Please. Today our guest is Dr. Esther Ihekweazu, who is a systems engineer. But she has a great story, and this is why we invite people to speak to us, because they have a great story that we believe can inspire or inform our listeners and viewers. So I'll just repeat it again, just so that you are sure that I understand how to pronounce your name. Dr. Esther Ihekweazu, you're welcome to this evening's event.
Thank you very much.
Oh, excellent, excellent. Do you know, like I've heard your story, but not many people have. So I wanted you to tell us, before we even start anything, because they would have read your bio, they would have seen that you are you studied in Nigeria, you studied in Brunel, you studied in Leeds, but just put a little bit of meat on all of that. Just give us, like, let's start with a 30-second biography, so that anyone who doesn't know you or who hasn't had the chance to read through that flyer would know who you are.
Okay, my name is Esther. I studied at the University of Nigeria in Nsukka, and I studied electronic engineering. And when I graduated, I felt I wanted to further my education and decided I was going to come to the UK to do that. So I came to the UK in 2002 to do a master's in data communications. And when I finished, I was offered a position to do my PhD at the university, but I didn't have any funding. So I decided to either look for a job or look for another PhD offer. And I got an offer from the University of Leeds, and it was fully funded. So I moved over to Leeds and did a PhD and finished in 2007, 2008, and then got a job afterwards. And I've been working ever since.
That's actually quite interesting, because there's a little bit of humility in the story you've just told. Because what I heard, and you feel free to deny this, was that you were best student at your master's, right?
Okay, let me take it back then. I
No, I'm just
graduated.
checking. I might have been wrong, but
I'll take it back. I
okay.
graduated top of my class in University of Nigeria in Nsukka. I won all the prizes there were to win. And then when I finished, I knew I had to, do a bit more in the educational sector. So I decided to come do my master's. And when I finished, I was also best of my class. And that's why I was given an offer to do a PhD. But the offer only came with part funding. And I couldn't get any additional funding to support me. And it was in London, which was expensive. So I had to turn down the offer and then look for other opportunities. And as God would have it, I got a very good one in Leeds that came fully funded. So I moved up to Leeds.
Okay, so now that's told me one of the very interesting things I want to hear, because I'm actually, why? My first question is, I'm trying to see how best to phrase it. How did your good grades help you? Because in Nigeria there's something that we call "let my people go." When you're tired of studying like this, I beg Gary, let me just finish. Why do you think it's important to do the very best you can do while studying?
I think I'll take it back to the Bible. There's a part in the Bible that says, do you see a man who is diligent in his ways, or do you see a woman who is diligent in her ways, that she would stand before kings? So if you put your best in, God would do his part, because you have to have something in your hands for him to bless. So you need to do your part, and God will do the rest.
Yeah, and that's actually quite interesting, doing your part. So, do you think that your results helped you? So your undergraduate results helped you in your postgraduate, and your postgraduate helped you in your PhD, and your PhD helped you in your job. Do you think that there's a relationship between how well you do and where you go in future, the choices that you have in front of you?
I would say yes and a bit no, because studying in Nigeria is different from studying in the UK. In Nigeria, if I'm being honest, we study to pass. And once you're done with the course, sometimes you don't even remember anything about it, even the course title. But in the UK, studying is much different. You study to understand, and you get to see how what you're studying applies to the job you might end up doing. So it's a bit different. So in Nigeria, you work hard because, you have to work hard. But here, you get to see results. I don't know if I'm a bit
Yeah, I
better.
think you're making sense, but maybe a little bit of explanation. You know what you said about studying to understand? That hit me quite interestingly. What is the how do you study? Because there will be some students who will be watching this and going, okay, studying in the UK is different. Oh, but she's just said study to understand. What does that really mean? How do you study to understand?
Okay, so if, for instance, you go into a lecture and the lecturer introduces a particular topic, you actually have to dig deep and find out a bit more about the topic. And because, being honest, for my education in Nigeria, there were still some missing bits, some bits of the foundation that were not properly laid. So what I had to do when I was studying for my master's was sometimes going back to the fundamentals to make sure I had a good foundation in order to build a good structure. So it's reading wide, reading deep, reading to understand what you're being taught.
Yeah. Oh, that's really interesting, because I remember when I was studying, and I'm sure that each of us has different studying experiences. They used to say things like, in Nigeria, you just cram what the lecturer gives you, or you buy their handouts and you've done it. You understand what I mean?
Yes, been there.
But that here, actually, you have to sometimes even tell the lecturer more than they've told you.
You have to tell them more than they've told you. You have
Yeah.
to come up with examples to justify why you're putting that opinion across. And no answer in a way is wrong, because provided you have evidence to support the answer, then you have a voice and you get listened to.
You just took that question out of my mouth, because I was actually just about to ask you, because if you disagree with your lecturer in Nigeria, about disagreeing with your lecturer here, did you ever feel that your opinion or your position in an essay was different from that of your lecturer?
In the UK, yes, I did. But you see, even taking it back one step, in the difference between Nigeria and here is respect is shown differently. Like here, you get to call your lecturers by their first name. I know I struggled with it when I first came because
So did I. So did I.
they looked older than I did. So why would how dare me call him Tony? But even when I tried Mr. Sir, he just said, no, call me Tony. And you find out that, yes, you show respect differently here. And that you get listened to. And you get listened to if you've done your homework. Because if you put your hands up and your question isn't relevant to what he's talking about, or it sort of shows that you haven't done the research, he might send you back to say, go do your research and come back. But if you've done the research, he listens because he wants somebody who is able to either prove him wrong, agree with him, or even give him another opinion to look at the topic he just thought.
Now I'm going to ask you a question, and this is an opinion-based one because, again, as we just said, there's no right or wrong answer. My first question is, because a lot of Nigerians come into the country planning to work. So when you were studying, did you work?
Yes, I did. I cleaned offices when I was a student.
Okay.
And I also taught other students maths, and I got paid to do that.
Oh, excellent. I wish you had taught me maths because let's not say what I got in maths. It's it's just not something I want to dwell on at the moment. But you did teach other students
Yes.
as well as work. So, they talk about work-life balance.
Yeah.
How did that work for you as a student? I mean, not just as a student, but as the top student in your class. How did you manage that work-life balance thing?
Oh, yeah. It's a bit of a struggle in the UK because sometimes you get paid per hour. And sometimes if you lose focus, you actually focus more on the money you're making and not your studying. So you always have to keep your goal in mind and don't get distracted by the money you're making, because the more hours you work, the more pay you get, but then your studying suffers. So you need to establish the balance and constantly remind yourself what your goals are, because you could get sidetracked.
Yeah. And not just work and study as well. As a Christian, I often worry sometimes when people say, "Oh, I'm not going to church. I'm going to work on a Sunday because I have to make money." I don't know what part did your faith play in this?
Oh, well, maybe because of the family I come from, I would normally call home on a Sunday, and the first question they would ask, what did the pastor talk about? So in a way, that kept me on the straight and narrow for a bit.
So
But
you had to go to church.
yeah, I had to go to church. But after a while, I found out that it actually helped my mental health, because if you're just working and studying and you have no form of downtime, then before you know it, you actually get yourself worn out and exhausted. So having a couple of hours on a Sunday where you meet up with people, you take a stroll to church, you listen to the sermon, you interact with people at the end, it's actually a good thing. And one thing that also helped me with church was you get to meet people in different professions. They get to tell you a bit about their jobs, and it gives you an insight to the world you want to fit into. Because if you keep yourself, because I was cleaning offices and I didn't want to remain in that job, I wanted to do something more. So if you don't put yourself out there where you get to meet people from different professions, you wouldn't be able to get maybe pointers on how to present your CV, pointers on what opportunities exist out there. So going to church helped me along those lines, even attending the OFNC meeting, because I got people who would look at my CV, give me advice, oh, have you tried applying here? So in a way, it actually gives you a way in to the workforce. And
Shameless
that
plug
does
for
help.
the OFNC here.
Oh, it helped me a lot.
So, when did you first join the OFNC? Let's get there.
I joined the OFNC during my PhD. So that was
Oh, in
2000
Leeds.
in Leeds. Yes, that was
Leeds is a really good branch
2000,
of the OFNC. So for
2004.
anyone watching, Leeds is a great branch. Or
It's
would
a
you?
great branch. And sometimes even came to pick us up from the house anytime we complained that we couldn't get the bus. It was really good. They
Oh,
were
so they would
supportive.
pick you up.
Yeah.
And in my branch, they fed us when we went for
Oh,
the
they fed us too. Yeah.
Oh, very good, very
We're
good, very
going
good.
for the food. Yeah.
Just checking that the branch is as good as my
No,
branch.
they're good as yours.
You know, we have this branch competition now, right? My branch is the best, right? Okay, excellent. So, but again, you talked about, I just wanted to build on that. So you said that you met people who told you about things like CV. What kind of help do you think you can get from specific help do you think you can get from maybe say mentors, senior colleagues? But okay, I'll ask you that later on. But the first thing I wanted to ask you was why, when you finished your master's, right? I'll get back to that. So when you finished your master's, you had all these choices in front of you. You could work, you could do a PhD, you could do what actually made you decide that the next step would be a doctorate rather than maybe employment?
The truth was I wasn't too sure what kind of job I wanted to do. So doing a PhD gave me enough time to actually know the job that I should do, because I did my master's in communication systems. So I could go work for Vodafone O2, but I felt I wanted to specialize. I wanted to do a bit more. So doing a PhD gave me that edge, gave me a bit more time to specialize before I came out into the workforce.
So everybody has their different story. But in your own case, you wanted to be more specialist. But maybe others might decide that they don't need that kind of specialization. But did you talk to people? You know what I mean? Did you ask questions? And when you did, what did they tell you?
Yeah, I spoke to people. I spoke to my family. I spoke to friends. I spoke to the lecturers in the university. I think the lecturers are a bit biased because they wanted me to stay back. My family were somewhat biased. They didn't want to pay for it, but they wanted me to do it. My friends felt, yeah, I think I got maybe a bit more balance from the conversations I had with my friends and cousins. They felt, yes, it was a good move for me because I still wanted to learn more and I wanted to specialize in a particular area.
Oh, that's really interesting. So then you do this PhD, and again, I want to take you through the application process for the PhD.
Yeah.
Because again, anyone who is finishing their masters and wanting to consider a PhD, what was your process of application? How did you go about it, applying for a doctorate program?
Okay, I had an idea on the areas I wanted to research on. So I then looked for universities who could offer me a research position in that area. So I had Brunel, I had another university in London, and there was Leeds. So I put an application to all of them, but for each one, the application was different because I had to research the university, research the lecturers who were in that research group in order to find out what they had to offer, what they had written, how interesting the group was. And then I put in an application and went to visit the different schools.
Okay. We have a question here. And that question is, was your degree in the UK enough to get you a job in the university? Oh, sorry, get it right. Was your degree in the UK enough to get you a professional job in the industry?
Oh, yes, it
Or
was.
or did you have to get other professional qualifications?
No, my job in the UK, my master's in the UK was enough to get me a job if I wanted to. I just felt I wanted to specialize.
Okay. And and then did you also have to learn other engineering skills outside of your degree, like all those wonderful professional exams that they're always talking about?
I didn't do any professional exams, but I learned how to program different coding languages and how to use different software tools.
Oh, that's interesting. But again, in learning those, what advantage did that give you when you were looking for work?
Oh, because on your CV, if you say you have experience using certain tools, it gives you somewhat of an advantage because your employer knows you're going to hit the ground running and you wouldn't require as much training as someone who didn't have that experience. But these days, most employers are willing to train. So yeah, I would still encourage people with or without the skills to put yourself out there. But if you do have time, it's nice to add that little icing on the cake because it does help.
All right. Excellent. Excellent. So now you were telling me about applying for a PhD. So I suspect that part of your choice for Leeds was the full scholarship. But maybe if you talked us through all the grants that were offered, anybody who is applying for a PhD might then know what the choices are that's available to them, and 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 maybe the resources they have, whether their resources would be sufficient if they were on a part-time funding or full-time. Can you just talk me through the various universities and what their offers were?
Okay, so for Leeds, the offer came with a full scholarship, but I wasn't offered the full scholarship to start with because I hadn't been in the UK long enough to qualify for the full scholarship. But because I had done my research right and I knew a lot about the lecturers, the papers they had written, what their research areas was, they wanted me to join the university. So when I got the offer, it was an offer with no funding, but the lecturers that had interviewed me said they were impressed with how prepared I was and then pushed back on the university. And the university had no choice but to give me the full funding, even if I didn't qualify for it. Oh, I think you're on mute.
That's correct. Okay. So that was Leeds. I think you had full board and full accommodation and full tuition, right?
Yeah, full accommodation and full tuition. That's right.
And what are the university policies in terms of conferences, things like that?
Oh, most universities would let you go for at least one conference because you need to publish a certain number of papers as a criteria to finish in your research. So with mine, I had 2 conferences to attend. One was within the UK, which the university paid for, and the second was in the US, and the university didn't pay for it. I actually applied for a student award. There was a certain conference in the US where if you put in your paper on time, it was peer reviewed. And if they felt the paper was of good quality, the conference body paid for you to come and do the presentation. So I got an award to go over to the US to do a presentation. And that's how I got my job.
So we'll talk about that job. That's an interesting story, isn't it? But what you're saying to me right now is that there are many ways of being able to pay for your conference. Yes. So you've talked about 2. Are there other ways?
University pays, sometimes
or the conference pays.
The conference pays, or sometimes if you're working in an area a company is interested in, the company will pay. Because I've got a student in our company who, she's not attached to the company, but she's working on an area we're interested in. So yeah, you can get somebody else to pay for it.
So that's interesting. Now, you just said this thing very casually just now. You said, and that's how you got your job. Tell me.
Okay, I traveled to the US in 2006 to give a presentation for a paper I had written, and the conference body sponsored the trip. I went over, did the presentation, had loads of questions, and when I was done, one of the person who had asked the question said he would like to have a chat with me with some other members from his company. So we had a chat and he said he liked what I presented and he would like to interview me, but he's based in the UK. And when he heard I was also based in the UK, he then made arrangements when I got back for me to come down to the office in Daventry for an interview. So I went down, had the interview, and then got offered a job before I finished my PhD. And I decided to accept it because I was in the writing up phase of my PhD. But I started the job, found out, well, there was a lot to learn, a lot of pressure from work, that I found out I wasn't doing as much writing in the evenings as I had expected. So I went up to them and said I needed a few months out to go back and finish my write-up. And they allowed me to do that. And the fantastic thing with the company was when I was out in Leeds doing my write-up, they still paid me for the months where I didn't do any company work, but they did that as a way to ensure I came back and continued working with them. So it was a good offer.
And I'm really glad you told me that story. It's very interesting because we thank God that. But tell me a little bit about value. How much does an employer want you if you're the right person for the job?
That's a good question. If you do your best, and I think something a family member had told me, with work, what you have to do is you have to work as unto God, and you have to anticipate need. So if you go into work and you work as unto God and you also anticipate need, then you become valued. But if you work and you feel, oh, well, it's not my father's business, you find out that, yes, you might not be as valued as somebody who is a step ahead, who is anticipating need and always going the extra mile to ensure that they get the job done.
Yeah, we talked about this at the beginning, didn't we? When I first asked that question about the difference between just let my people go and so I suspect from what you're saying that commitment is an important aspect in determining, progress. They want to see your commitment. Does that make sense?
It does make sense, yes.
Yeah. I can't put it as eloquently as you, but so you told me this. You just said now that when you were studying, when you took time off to complete your PhD, and they kept paying you. Now that's a really interesting story, and for me, like I said, it just demonstrates kind of like the value that the company had in you. And I suppose again, since you thanked God for it, it also demonstrates um, God's power to do miracles in your life. Can you just tell me a little bit more about how you felt that God helped you in those times? How he answered your questions, the kinds of questions you were asking him in terms of getting a job, and the solutions that God provided for you.
Okay, if I just go back to when I was being paid while I was doing my write-up, at first I thought they made a mistake. So I called them up and told them that, well, I'm here in Leeds and not in Daventry. But they said, oh, it's okay, that I should just get my write-up done and come back when I'm done. But I think in every point, it's putting my needs and desires before God, and then trying to ensure I'm walking in line with where He wants me to go. So it's, yes, just listening to what God has to say, and then just doing my best at every point of the way, and trying to ensure, yes, that I'm shining my light no matter how bright or dim
Yes.
the light is.
Yes, it says in the Bible, let your light so shine before men that they would see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven. So you've done an amazing job so far, and I just want to thank God for your life. And just to repeat what we said earlier on, that if anyone has any questions, if you want to either raise your hand to ask the question, if you don't want to raise your hand and you just want to put the question in the chat box, that would be fantastic as well. But before we carry on, yeah. Okay. So just to remind you, if you want to do that, that's fantastic as well. I just wanted to ask a few questions just generally. So now you get into work now, and you're managing all kinds of things. You're married, you're married, you're best student and best this and best that. And how has your work-life balance changed now in work?
Oh, it's changed quite a lot. Before I got married and had kids, I think I used to work very long hours, and I didn't mind, and the company didn't mind. But now with kids, it's looking for a balance. So trying to ensure that I get my work done, but I also spend, time with my family, and just committing everything I do to God's hands. And especially when I have maybe a challenging project at work, trying to, pray about it and ask God to open my eyes to whatever the solution might be so that I could get it resolved quickly and then just move on to something else. So it's just constantly committing what I do to God's hands and allowing Him help me, succeed at the different things that I find myself involved in.
You sound to me like a very, very busy person. So when we talked about work-life balance now, what about in the university when you were working? Were you also involved in, our universities are very social. They would say to you one day, oh yeah, take a trip to Edinburgh Castle or take a trip to. So did you find yourself involved in those kinds of things, and were they beneficial?
I did that every now and again. So I did Edinburgh. Because I had lived in London, I'd already seen a bit of London. I did Nottingham, but it's just trying to strike the right balance, because it's nice to move around the UK so you get to explore and see what it looks like, how friendly or what the people are. So it's nice to move around, but it's always nice to keep your goal in mind and remain focused. So all work and no play, but keep it balanced.
How would you think? Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah. Did you ever feel at some point that your balance was tilting in a wrong direction? And how would you correct that?
I think the friends you keep helps, because if you associate with people who are like you, then it's easy to sort yourself out sooner rather than later. But if you're hanging with people who are not like you, then it's easy to get distracted. So for instance, if you're hanging with people who are more interested in making money to studying, over time you'll find yourself being pulled in that direction if you're not careful. Or if you find that your friends are more people who want to have more of a social life than do the studying, you would find yourself being pulled. So sometimes it's choosing your friends carefully, because they act as your support network and always help put you back in check if you need putting back in check. Oh, you're mute. Sorry.
Yeah, I know. I was just getting my hand to quickly get there. I don't work as fast as my mouth. Apparently, I start talking before I'm muted. But that's the best way. It's the way I'm thinking. So I wanted to ask another question about, now that you're working, you probably come across a lot of younger people who are maybe starting out. Have you been involved in as people um, talked to you when you were starting out? Have you been involved in talking to them, and what have you found when you talk to students of these students in this last kind of, since you've been working? Is there a difference in approach of students?
At work, I sort of act as a mentor to the younger engineers, and there is a slight difference now compared to what we had before COVID, because now we have a hybrid working arrangement where a few days you're in the office and some days you're back at home. And what I've noticed is younger engineers struggle with staying focused when they work at home compared to when we were full time in the office. So it's like I would still say, keep the focus, find out what your targets are, and just stay committed to meet those targets, and you'll succeed.
Okay, somebody's asked a question. What's plagiarism and how can I avoid it?
Ooh, that's a big one. In Nigeria, you could get away with handing in somebody else's work as if it was all you had to do. Sometimes was just put your name on it, and the lecturer sometimes didn't even notice, which is wrong, because at the end of the day, you wouldn't have done the research for yourself, understood the subject matter for yourself. So that's there. But in order to understand a subject matter, you have to research it, find out what different people's opinions about it is, and then put it in your own word. If you're taking out, lifting parts from other literature, you actually have to give credit to the person that you've borrowed a sentence or two from. You have to say, oh, well, this person said this, and put the references so that they will know that's not your own words, but you've actually just lifted this and you've given the correct acknowledgement. So it's acknowledging where you've taken bits from in order to support your argument.
I'm just thinking about this because I know that plagiarism is a big problem here. What kind of difficulties can plagiarism cause for maybe a student or even a researcher in the end? Because after studying, some people might decide to write articles. What kind of problems can result from plagiarism? Do you know?
You can get discredited if somebody finds out that you've taken on somebody else's piece of work and you've not given the correct acknowledgement to it. You could actually lose your standing. You could lose, it's you shouldn't do it. You should always say where you've gotten bits from.
Let's just say it's bad.
Yes.
Is that a good?
Yeah, it is.
I haven't seen any more questions in the chat box. Have I missed out any yet? Okay, let's carry on and presume there has been no further questions. There's someone who asked me a question. However, I have a 2-year-old child, and my husband is about to join me. I don't know, that might or might not have been your experience. How can I sort all these issues out, and how will it affect my studies or in your case, my work?
So the husband is currently in the UK and the
No.
wife wants.
Let's just say one spouse is currently in the UK, but not the other.
Okay.
But the spouse in the UK has a 2-year-old, so it's more likely to be, So
Okay.
you're looking after a spouse is looking after the child in the UK, whereas the other spouse is in Nigeria.
Okay, so if the other spouse is coming over with a child, it's trying to ensure before the person comes over, you've actually done your research as to what the childcare options are. Because if the spouse who is coming over intends to work, then you need to make sure that there's a balance between your studying so you don't lose the focus and the job the person is taking on. So if the person is taking on a job where they're out at night, then that might work well for you, because then you'll be sleeping when the child is sleeping. And then in the day when you have to go for lectures, it's striking that balance. And it's only for a period of time, because the studying doesn't last forever. 1 year might seem a long time, but in the UK with the changing seasons, it goes by really quickly. So it's just trying to make that balance and trade-off and sacrifice so that you're supporting each other. Oh, I think you're on mute.
Dr. Ife, someone's hands are up.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Who's got their hands raised? Someone has your hands raised. Do you want to unmute yourself and speak?
Thank you very much. I was not able to find the chat box. That's why I had to raise my hand.
No, that's fine. That's
It's
fine.
okay.
And my Microsoft Teams wasn't telling me that your hand was raised. You have to introduce yourself first and then ask your question.
Good evening. My name is Theodora. And thank you. I don't know if she's a professor, but thank you, Professor Esther,
No, I'm
for
not a professor.
She's still a
I'm
doctor.
not. I'm just a doctor. I'm just Esther.
thank you for all of these things that you're sharing with us. But my question is, I'm really well. I don't know if I'm okay to say well done because like you're up there. So I just wanted to ask a question. Searching for PhD opportunities can be a bit daunting. Can you please talk to us about that? How one can find opportunities that come with studentships, or one that is fully funded. That's my question. Thank you.
Okay. I think first is starting with the university you're in if you're studying at the moment, because lecturers would normally put out the opportunities they have for research or sponsorship they're getting in from companies. And then there's a website. I can't remember what it is right now, but there's a website where PhD places are advertised, and that's where I actually found the one I got from Leeds.
So if there's any difficulty, just Google PhDs, right?
Yeah, let me see if I can. Yeah, because I remember.
But if you come up with the website, if you can tell us now, if not,
I'll just put it in the chats.
put it in the chat.
Yeah.
And Miss Theodora will be able to access it. While waiting for the next question, I just wanted to ask, what was the decision for you between an academic career and a career in industry? What were the factors that made you decide which? Because quite a number of people, when they're doing their PhD, they're thinking of themselves as researchers and they're thinking of the university they'll be lecturing in. But you obviously went into industry and have done very well, by the way. So what was it that made you decide industry, not research?
When I first started my PhD, I enjoyed the research opportunity I was given and all the things I was working on. And I had made a decision to actually stay within the university and just continue as a researcher. But towards my final year, there was a project I worked on that involved me going into industry to get data and do some analysis for them. And that opened my eyes to the fact that you could be a researcher, but you could be within a company. So I then started looking at that as an opportunity, and that's why I then decided to, move into industry. And because the good thing about industry is you get to see what you've designed. Whereas in university, at least in the university I was, it took a few years before it actually was pushed into any product. But with where I am, I get to see the contributions I've made, either in a mobile phone or I get to see it, and that's exciting.
Are you going to let us into the secrets of the contributions of your research too, so that when I see some implementing a mobile phone, I'll go, oh, that's Esther's work. Oh,
Okay, so what I do is I've worked designing sat navs, your GPS receivers.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the GPS receivers, at least the ones in some particular phones, have some algorithms that I've designed in order to help you get your position and get from your house, hopefully to the shops or to Edinburgh or wherever you want to go.
Or wherever you want to go.
Yes.
Oh, excellent. Now, one of the things you said earlier on was that your research paper got you this job. So are you researching in this job? Are you in the research department of your current?
I kind of balance.
Is your current position a research position?
And I'm a systems engineer, so
systems
I do a bit of research in order to improve our products. I do a bit of research in order to fix bugs, but I'm also currently working on algorithms that will make the product better. So it's a mix.
Oh, it's a mix. And so are you still writing research papers?
Yes.
Because obviously you wrote during your PhD. So are you still writing now?
I'm still writing, but maybe not as many as I would like to, but I still try to put out at least 1 or 2 a year. So I'm still writing papers.
Oh, wow. Wow. I'm not going to ask you what you wrote because I probably will not understand it. Just like you did not teach me maths when you should have taught me maths.
I could still teach you.
Let's not go there. You might find that I'm a bit of a challenge for you
No
in
one,
math.
no one is a challenge. No one is
Well,
a challenge.
just to put it this way, my dad used to teach maths, and everybody used to wonder why they thought maths was a problem, but I still failed maths. I hope that gives you an idea of the challenge that's ahead of you.
I don't mind taking on the challenge.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So we're talking about your research. Now, I want to go back to something that I talked about earlier on. You said you mentor students, and I was asking you about what students, what the differences are between the students, between when you studied and studying now. Let's talk about the kinds of things you would recommend for students. Now, if somebody came to you and said, I want to do a master's, what kind of advice would you give them?
I would find out why do they want to do a master's, because you need a why. Because there's some times where you'll face challenges. Your why is what takes you through those challenges. So you need a why. And then I would ask the person where they see themselves in the next 5 years, because you want to find out there are different routes to get to Edinburgh. You need to find out that you're on the right route to get you to Edinburgh. So I would find out why and where the person wants to be in 5 years. And then ask questions like, can you fund it? Where can you look for funding if you can't, in order to provide support and options for how to move to the next step of the goal that they've set themselves.
I recognize that you may not be. Can you just give me an idea of the areas that students can look for funds? I mean, obviously everyone has different ones, but which ones do you think you would have found the most useful?
Sometimes it's actually, there are different ways to do it. First, you can actually go to the university you think you're interested in. Every university or most universities have a funding page. So they'll tell you these are the funds that are available. And some of them even have filters where if you put in your nationality and stuff, it actually limits it to the ones that you're eligible for. And then you can actually do the research, find out what do they require? Do I need to do a write-up? Do I need to send myself, do I need to send them a CV? Do I need to fill an application out? And pay a lot of attention to the deadline, because I know those who submit last minute can still get it, but sometimes it actually shows that, yeah, you've put in some work if you submit on time and not at 12 midnight before it expires. So just trying to stay on top of it and put things in a timely manner normally goes a long way to help. Oh, you're on mute.
You know what just happened?
What?
I actually was unmuted, and then I muted myself to
Yeah.
talk. My apologies. So, do you know now? I can't even remember what it was. Okay, that I was going to ask. No, I was going to ask you a question about. You were talking about submitting at the right time. What does a funder want to know when you're filling their forms?
They want to know your why. Why do you want me to give you the money compared to somebody else? So you need to come up with a strong why. Why do you need this? And you need to come up with what you're going to do, where you see yourself in X number of years, because they're not just looking at the now, I want to do a master's. They're looking at what would this help you, help your community, help somebody else achieve. They want to see how it impacts your community by giving the funds, because that would help in the decision-making process.
Excellent. Have I unmuted myself again?
No, you're okay. I can hear you.
No, I'm okay this time. Yeah, I haven't. Okay, now, so you got a job in industry, of course. What do you think that your employers saw in you when they offered you the job? Because we talked about value earlier on. What do you think your employers saw? This is the time to shine. You can see. This is your time to tell us how good you are.
The one thing I think that impressed them, and I think that also helped when I went for the interview in Leeds, was I came prepared. I found out because they had sent me the list of people who were going to interview me, and I did a research on each of them. So at the end of the day, they asked a few questions to get started, but I kind of took over after a while because I was telling them a bit about what they had done, asking them questions, what next, how were you going to take the research forward and stuff. So in a way, when you compliment someone or show the person that you've taken the trouble to find out a bit about them, then yes, that keeps the conversation going.
Oh, you have to tell me a bit more about this so that when I'm applying for my next job, I'll come to you. So
we just need to do the research.
You just need to do the research. Right. So you did this for both your industry and PhD. So the rules are essentially the same.
It's the same, yes.
It's the same.
Show that you're interested. If it's a company, find out about the company. Find out what do they do. Are they in the news? Have they done something that, made the news, or have they written papers? Have they attended conferences? You ask questions like that, and it impresses them because it shows that you're interested, you know what they do, you've taken the time out to find out, and that keeps the conversation going.
Do you have to, how deep does the research have, do you have to have read their papers, for example? Not even just read, discussed the papers intelligently, or just, showed that you are interested enough to research?
For the one in Leeds, I read the papers. And when I got to the conclusion, I had questions like, what next? Where were we going to take this forward? So you have to, if you're doing something, do it well. That's what I would say.
So this is part of this commitment thing we're talking about earlier on, right?
If you're doing it, do it well.
Yeah.
Because so they could come back and ask a question, and you might know the. So if you say you've done something and you haven't really done it, your integrity is at play. So if you're doing something, do it well. And if you haven't, then just hold your hands up and say, sorry, I started looking at it, but I didn't finish. And then that's okay. But if you give them the impression you have when you haven't and you get found out, it affects your integrity, and you don't want that.
Yeah. You see, this is what makes... So, right. What is the difference between an average student and an excellent student? Because you see, you were best in your class every time. What was the formula?
You see, there's nothing. Everybody is an excellent student because what you put in is what you get out. Because I still don't see myself as excellent. I see myself as hardworking. So everybody would get what they put in. Yeah, it works that way.
Okay. We don't seem to have any questions here. Do we have any? I haven't seen any questions. No questions. It looks like that. Okay, but that's good. Have we enjoyed ourselves so far, me and you?
I've enjoyed blowing my trumpet, yeah.
You know that song that goes, everybody blow your trumpet. But no, I don't think it has been blowing your trumpet, you see. What I think is that it has been informing us. You have been sharing the secrets of success. It's not the same thing as blowing your trumpet. Do you understand? So, for example, instead of asking what's the secret of your success, I've taken 1 hour to ask you different questions that have teased out various bits.
Yeah,
that has been the intention. It wasn't to make you blow your trumpet, because you started, one of the things you said at the beginning was, by God's grace, you got this job. Do you understand what I mean? So I didn't look at it as blowing your trumpet, and I really have been really grateful for the time that I've spent with you. I certainly have learned a lot, even though I have gone through all the academic and professional life and done as much of it as I wanted to do. All right. So I'm really grateful for the time. We've spent an hour. Most lectures are 1 hour long, aren't they?
Yes.
So you've just given us a lecture, but we've made it a smooth and easy lecture. So I'd like to thank you very much for the time that you spent with us. It's been really, really good talking to you, Esther. Last year, I want to say that last year I don't know, where have you been all my life? Because it was only last year I first met you. You should have been inspiring me all this time, but you only started inspiring me since last year. That's very bad of you, you know. That's the first bad thing. The second bad thing is you refuse to teach me mathematics.
I've
I mean,
offered. I've offered. I have offered. I've offered. I think there's a question in the chat.
Who
How
is
do
there?
you develop your programming skills to an expert level? Oh, that's a good question. I read books. I did some online tutorials, and then I gave myself a project to do, because I found out with programming, you could read a lot, but till you apply it, you don't really know how much you know, if that makes sense. So I think the application of what you've learned actually helps you understand it better, gives you the quest to even know more. And yeah, you just get better at it the more you do it. So sometimes it's look for either projects you want to work on or one that your lecturer wants you to do, and then just crack on and do it, and always go a step further. That helps.
Oh, all right, thank you. So, sorry, in addition to the question, if you don't mind.
Oh, that's okay.
Yeah, for example, if you're a PhD student, all that you worry about is you want to write a code that will get the result done, because you're not doing for anybody. So I found out that I just do sequential programming. I prefer to just write it instead of putting in functions.
I know what you mean.
Object-oriented program. So I can't. In most cases, I can't bring out my code and say, okay, this is it. It's working, but I know it's not properly packaged. So how do you?
At least you've gone one step. You know how to write code that works. That's the first step. The next step would be maybe looking for one of those free online courses you get on Coursera and doing a course, because when you do a course, you get to learn a bit more about the programming standards and the best practices for coding. And then you just start translating your code into industry standard code. So you've already gone past the first step.
Thank you very much. Dr. Kupola, can I ask if Dr. Dimu has put the Microsoft Forms link online on the chat box?
Yes, he has done that.
Okay, fantastic. So please, just for your feedback, could you, anyone who wants to give us feedback, please send your feedback, filling that form. And thank you very much. I will repeat this again. Thank you very much, Dr. Esther Ihekweazu. What are my marks out of 10 for pronunciation?
9 out of 10.
Good. So my maths lessons loading.
Yes.
I have qualified for
coming your way soon.
Coming my way soon. Thank you so very much. God bless you. Again, let me just repeat that this is organized by the Overseas Fellowship of Nigerian Christians. And a lady I know believes that Leeds is the best branch, but I don't.
It is.
Even though you no longer live in Leeds.
I know. It was the first branch I joined, so it's still my first love.
It's Sheffield, please.
Oh, the Sheffield, okay.
Can you imagine? By the way, the area secretary of Leeds, the current area secretary of Leeds, was one of our guests in Arise magazine. I think it was 2018 or something. So we publish a magazine every year, Arise, and the new version will be published during the August Family Conference. If you want to attend the conference and you haven't done so, please feel free to go to the OFNC website. But you have only 5 hours to do this and register for the conference. Have you registered? Am I going to see you again this year? We can begin our math.
I haven't registered, not yet.
Look at that.
I still have 5 hours to go.
Yes. So we can begin our maths lessons at the end of August when you register for the conference. Also to say again, as I said, that this will be out on YouTube, and I will send out the links to anyone who's interested. If you want to find out more, we have a WhatsApp group that's called the Student Support Group for international students coming into the country. I'll read out my phone number, 07817734663. Get in touch with me and I'll add you to the group. And we try to answer questions for students and do things like that and tell them what the OFNC is doing. Apart from the Back to the Roots program and the August Family Conference that I just talked about, we have men's conferences, women's conferences, women in business conferences. If you want to find out more, go to www.ofnc.org.uk. On behalf of all the members of the Back to the Roots team, Dr. Segun Popola, Dr. Uchechi Nwadike, Dr. Gbenga Dimu, Dr. Godwin Oleku, and Professor Bamidele Adebisi. My name is
Dr. Ife. Sorry, I think there's a question in the chat box.
There's a question. Who has asked the question?
Susan.
Okay.
Oh, Susan, my friend Susan. Susan, can you read the question, or can you read Susan's question, please?
Does the fact that you have a PhD have anything to do with getting a good job? I'll say it does. Why I say it does is you can get a job with the first degree, you can get a job with a master's, you could get a job with a PhD. But with a PhD, you come in as an expert. So yeah, you do get slightly better pay than if you just came in after your undergraduate. But a lot is expected of you because you're coming in to solve problems. Whereas if you just came in from a first degree, there's still a lot of opportunity to be trained. But here you still get trained, but not to the same degree as if you were coming in after a first degree. So more is expected, so more is given.
To whom much is given, much is expected. Is that what they say in the Bible? Yeah. So, okay, so thank you very much, Susan, for your question. Again, like I said, since we have no further questions, we're going to close this now. But again, thank you very much, Dr. Esther Ihekweazu, and thank you very much to me for my excellent pronunciation, I would say.
Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah. We'll be having other programs in future. So when we have those programs, we'll be letting everyone know about them. Okay. Please feel free. When the YouTube link comes, please feel free to share. Okay. God bless you all. And it's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you, Dr. Esther. Thank you very much again.
Thank you very much, and have a good weekend.
And you. I'm just about to turn off the recording in a few minutes.
Dr. Esther, I would really love